you hear us back there? It's a real pleasure for me to be able to introduce you to Mr. Martin Cardwell. I was able to attend a seminar at the IBM facility in Manassas, Virginia, about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I had the pleasure of meeting Martin there. Martin's been with IBM for about 25 years and has held a variety of technical and management positions. He is currently IBM's External Program Manager, a position that he's held since 1988. He's responsible for IBM's legislative and community relations activities in the Commonwealth of Virginia. He earned a BS in Engineering Physics from Loyola College in Baltimore, Maryland, an MS in Metallurgical Engineering from the University of Kansas. A couple of things I would also like you to know about Marty. He's a delightful person. He enjoys fishing, sailing, golf, and walking on the beach. He says one of his most positive experiences was raising a litter of Labrador puppies. I've also learned that he's of Irish extraction, which explains some of the other things I'd like to describe about him. If you were in Fred Talbot's presentation this morning, one of the things that Fred challenged us all to do is ask questions. Why? Don't make assumptions, but want to know why things are the way they are, or just to challenge the way we look and the way we feel about things. I think you'll find Marty Cardwell that kind of person. Marty?
Well, good afternoon. I'm going to share with you a little secret. To help me with my trifocals, I need the speech on an angle, and wonder is what a pie plate can do. Susan, thank you very much for that kind introduction. And Dr. Templin, thank you very much for volunteering me to do this. I appreciate it greatly. I'd like you all to know that I did my very best. These are tough times, and of course Bob had to reach for a speaker that was reachable from a dollar and cent point of view as far as the school's budget was concerned. So I went out of my way to appear to all of you today that I really and truly was from IBM in Armonk, New York. I wore my pinstripe suit. I want you to know that down here I have my wingtips on, and I wore my button-down shirt. But I'm also honest. Being a bachelor, this shirt is drip dry. And finally, one last thought to sort of set a challenge for me. I recognize that I'm the last thing between you and freedom today. And Bob, I don't care how hard you would have volunteered me. If I knew I was going to be anchorman on the bowling team, I would have said no. I certainly hope when I finish, you all feel that I've accomplished a lot more than Hurricane Bob did. He certainly didn't live up to his expectations. Of course, in his case, that may be perfectly acceptable. Let me talk today, this afternoon, in the short time we have together, about 4 things, if I may. And is it loud enough in the back? Can you all hear me? Great. First off, I'd like to talk about Thomas Nelson Community College, the business called Thomas Nelson Community College, and if you will, its excellent reputation. I'd then like to spend a few minutes and talk about the business you all are in. Then I'd like to go on and talk a little bit about the business environment that you all find yourselves in. And last but not least, some thoughts to take with you from this convocation and fall meeting about running this business you're in. Well, let's start off and talk about Thomas Nelson Community College, the business. And I'm very honored this afternoon to be here with you, the faculty, the staff of the community college. And let me tell you why. because for the past several years, I've had the distinct pleasure to serve on the State Council of Higher Education's Outstanding Faculty Awards Selection Committee. And for those of us who have been on that committee for the last 2 or 3, or the last 5 years, that experience has convinced me, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that Virginia has the most prestigious grouping of higher education institutions in the nation. And that is because of you, people in this room, the faculty and staff of those institutions. In the 25 years I've been with IBM, I have transferred just about every state east of the Mississippi, I think. And wherever I am, wherever I've lived, I've always had friends. When their kids were old enough to go off to school, Virginia was one of the places they talked about. It's quite a compliment. IBM, for its part, has had a major plant operation in Manassas since the late 60s. And we can tell you that graduates of all the institutions of higher education in Virginia have helped staff it. But more importantly, those graduates have helped us to succeed and be internationally competitive. For its part, IBM thinks very highly of your school, and we're involved with you in several areas. Starting in 1987 with Hampton University as part of IBM's Technology Grant Transfer Program. And as I understand as we speak, that has grown into a faculty and staff technology resource center that has either opened or will be opening in a matter of days. And of course, we're working with Dr. Dunn. He has a contract, or Don Dunn. We have a contract. He has a contract with IBM to develop a scientific calculator for visually impaired students. So we're involved with you in a lot of ways. The Secretary of Education in the state of Virginia thinks very highly of you. The programs you have initiated, Dr. Templin was asked by the Secretary not only to be a member of the Governor's Advisory Committee on Workforce 2000, but to also play a lead role, as I like to call it, one of the gang of three, is developing the plan to implement the committee's recommendations. And the Virginia Department of Volunteerism, I think Susan referred to it earlier, has been asked to take the lead in helping communities throughout Virginia establish school community business partnerships. And one of the people they wanted there to help start that is your own Susan Fink. Because with her experience on the Peninsula Partnership and as director of the Adams Project, she was very well qualified to help share with the rest of the state what needed to be done to putting excellent partnerships together. And I can tell you that whether it's as a member of the Virginia Business Council Education Committee, or chairman of the State Chambers Education Committee, whenever businesses from the Hampton Roads area get together and talk about education and people being proactive in their community, they talk about you. So my hat's off to each and every one of you. Your reputation precedes you, and it's an honor for me to be part of this today. Having talked about you and the pride you should have in what you accomplished in your reputation, let me give you a little perspective from my point of view about the business you're in. And I believe you're in the most important business in America today. From a national perspective, the administration's education strategy, formerly called America 2000, and if you haven't read the little booklet, you should, reflects thus on the business that you're in. It says, nations that nurture ideas will move forward in the years to come. Nations that stick to stale old notions and methods will falter and fail. All we have to do is look at the events of the last 12, 24 hours in Russia. The days of the status quo are over. We must not only transform our schools, but transform every American adult into a lifelong student. That sounds like Thomas Nelson Community College to me. And from a Commonwealth point of view, in the Workforce 2000 report that Dr. Templin helped put together, there's a statement in there that stands out very bold. And that is very simply, when we think about Workforce 2000, in Virginia, we're talking about 92% of that workforce is already working today. We don't have time to prepare replacements. We do, we should talk, plan, strategize, and implement plans to make existing schools better. To create a new generation of American school, yes indeed we do. And to cultivate communities where learning can happen. Understand all that. That's very important. But if you do all that and don't focus the resources of institutions like Thomas Nelson Community College and your sister schools throughout Virginia, you're the ones that have to carry the torch for the 92% already in the workforce today. So for the adults who think our school days are over, please tell them that we need to become a nation of students. We must recognize learning as a lifelong process, a lifelong job doing the same work. It's disappearing as fast as my hair is turning gray. From an IBM perspective in Virginia, let me point out the following about this business you're in. Our entry-level employees, it's mandatory that they have a working knowledge of statistics because statistical process control is the norm. And I'm talking about administrative people, manufacturing people, production control people, internal truckers. Entry-level employees need to know statistical process control. I'll also tell you that in our business here in Virginia, obsolescence is the norm. We recently invested $30 million plus in manufacturing and tooling in a semiconductor manufacturing building at our site. And we did that knowing full well that 18 months from the time it was operational, it would be obsolescent as far as the product coming off that line. That's the business we're in. Maybe to bring that home one more point. One of my coworkers recently had the opportunity to participate in one of the Workforce Virginia 2000 sessions that Bob and others held with Secretary Dyke and Secretary Fromme at James Madison. And one of the questions we were all asked was, what education and skills will be needed in the workforce in the next 10, 15, 20 years? Well, we were prepared with an elegant answer for that. But let me answer it my way. Beats the heck out of me. I know that the skills our students will need in the future will be based upon reading, writing, speaking, computing, if you will, critical analytical skills. But forecasting what skill? I believe that's impossible. And that's for those who like to joust with Windows to get that answer. Because by the time you test it, maybe it's my physics background coming out of me, but by the time you finally run an experiment and test it, you've disturbed the results and it's changed before you've ever got a chance to get it down good. Just think, last Monday, August 12th, was the 10th anniversary of the PC. Anybody like to speculate we're going to be in the next 10 years? So I truly believe, if you want to talk about what people need to know in Workforce 2000, let me give you a little buzzword that I like to use to help me put life in perspective today. And that is that the future is present before the present is ever past. And that is more true today than it's ever been. In the 1990s and beyond, power is going to shift from the employer to the employee as firms continue to restructure to compete in global markets. Knowledge workers, those with up-to-date skills and adaptable minds, will be in general demand. No longer will too many people chase too few jobs, except low and unskilled jobs. As author and management consultant Peter Drucker has said, the most important competition any company will face is the worldwide competition for the best talent. So we've talked a little bit about Thomas Nelson. We talked a little bit about the business you're in. Let me make some guesses now, if I may, about your business environment. You're probably a little unhappy with the raw material coming in your front door. We are. We find high school graduates and college graduates in general are not as good as they used to be. You're probably concerned that your revenues are not growing the way they used to, and that state funding shortfalls are putting pressure on tuition and fees, as well as your ability to provide the course offerings you'd like to provide. And I'm sure your expenses are increasing. Just the cost of business is growing too fast, the simple things we used to take for granted. Maybe even the pressure to do more with less is so intense as to make working harder seem easier than working smarter. And finally, perhaps there are a few who are wishing, perhaps waiting, for economic recovery and business as usual. Well, let me speculate that your business, just like IBM's, will never return to whatever business as usual was. What I'd like to focus on now, and last but not least, obviously, is spend some time on running your business. But let me say categorically, right from the outset, I don't know how, and I don't think I'd be very good at it. And I wouldn't presume to tell you how to do it. But I can talk about the one I've been in for 25 years. And lately, I've been reading some things in newspapers and magazines that I'd like to share with you. There have been headlines like, "They're stuck in the past," or "Their costs are too high, they can't be competitive," or "Their new products are too slow to get to the market, their competition is beating them. They're the Sears and Roebuck of their industry. They're too big. That institution will be too hard to change." Well, the "they" isn't the mythical "they" that we frequently hear used by members of an organization when complaining about the organization. We've all heard that as in, "Why don't they?" or "they should have." They're not talking about that "they" in those headlines. The "they" they're talking about is the IBM Corporation. And after 25 years, let me tell you, it hurts. I take it personally. I am the IBM Corporation, and vice versa. Change is indeed difficult. The new, the different are very unknown. Fear of the unknown is basic to all of us. We need only look at our children to be aware of how true that is. Problem is, we often want change, but not if it hurts me individually. Well, at IBM, we have begun an organized process to achieve what we call market-driven quality. We're going to try and make the elephant dance. What we're doing is making the customer the final arbiter of our performance. Recently, our Rochester, Minnesota facility won the Malcolm Baldrige Award for Quality. But that was only one product, the AS400, a mid-range machine, and one facility, if you will, a first step for the entire IBM company. Through that competition, though, we found, and perhaps you've seen this too, that customers want all products to be defect-free and solve their problems. To help ensure that we deliver quality products to our customers, we focus on the processes we use to deliver those products. We do everything in our power to make them perfect. The battle cry in IBM these days is 6 Sigma. If you haven't had a statistics course lately, what we're trying to do is have no more than 1 defect in 10 million operations. That's what Sony and Panasonic strive for when they deliver to your local wholesale outlet store a VCR. Because when you take it out of the box, there's no hesitation in your mind it's going to work, right? That's the number you need to achieve. So we're concentrating on improving the process, not fixing the product after it's manufactured with a defect. We're trying to do it at the source, and we find that it costs us an amazingly cheaper to do to fix it, do it right the first time, than rework. And of course, we've known that for years. Look at the American automobile industry. So each manager, each supervisor at IBM, with some training assistance, is being required to develop a market-driven quality plan for his or her organization. And I'd like to share with you a few of those questions. Does the organization, at any level, be it the employee, supervisor, manager, the boss, do you have clearly identified internal and external customer? If you don't know who your customer is, who's receiving the output of your work, you'll never figure out if you're satisfied in giving them what they really want. Number 2, do you have a system for determining what the customer is truly looking for? Have you asked the customer lately, are they getting what you want? For years, the IBM company had a questionnaire it sent out to all our customers and asked them to fill in the blanks. Of course, the questions we asked were the ones we wanted to ask and not the ones they suggested we should ask. Thirdly, do you really understand, do you have a little map, a little roadmap of what you do in your organization? Do you have a clear set of objectives? And do you, above all, have a measurement system for what you do? And I was trying to think of some corollaries between the complicated business you all are involved in and run and administer and the one I'm used to. Let me tell you what some of our measurements are and see if the analogy holds water or not. What's the competition doing? Well, wonder what other community colleges in Virginia are doing. Wonder what they're doing in Maryland. Wonder what they're doing in Frankfurt, Germany. There's a yardstick competition. Market share. Market share for a community college? How about how many businesses in your geographic area are doing any or all of their own training? If they are, that's lost revenue to you. You can do it probably better than they can. You're the professionals. Innovation versus invention. How quick do you get to the customer what he or she needs to solve their training problem or concern? Expenses, we all have that, do more with less. Defects, if you really know your process, what are the defects doing to you? How much do they really cost? And finally, some way of measuring a return on investment for the amount of resource that's in your office or operation. If nothing else, consider the investment desk space, heating and air conditioning, your share of the costs, secretarial support, paper, whatever. What's an investment in whatever it is that's happening? What's the return? We're asking every manager in the IBM company to be ready at a moment's notice to put on a 20-minute pitch about where he or she is on their market-driven quality goals. Let me cite 2 examples from my own experience that are embarrassing, but maybe perhaps you can learn through them. And maybe they'll have some relevance to the business you're involved in. Many of you, I'm sure, read several weeks back about the agreement in principle between Apple and IBM to participate in joint development activities. You talk about a marriage between the Hatfields and the McCoys. I mean, I'm not so sure whether the IBM logo should have red, yellow, green stripes, or whether the apple should be painted blue, but one way or the other, we're going to get together. Certainly, this was a headline-making event, and one ripe for newsprint. And I'm not going to sit here and speculate why IBM did or did not do that, or Apple. But that same week, another, much more important IBM partnership was announced. And I'm sure there's no one in this room that even read about it or heard about it. IBM and Siemens announced a joint semiconductor partnership in Europe. Today, semiconductors are made with a photolithography process that utilizes light waves. Tomorrow, the miniaturization, the continued reduced size in semiconductors necessitates the use of X-rays. Light waves are just too big. IBM, who's the world's largest producer of semiconductors, we don't sell them on the open market, we consume our own, is nearly finished building the U.S.'s only planned facility for X-ray lithography. The Japanese have several nearly online and operating, and a total well over 20 that will be up and running by the year 1993. That's 1 to 20 plus. So as you can well see, Siemens and IBM establishing one of these facilities in Europe. It's what's known as a partnership of defense, a partnership to be competitive, a partnership to maintain market share. You can't do it all, nor can you have it all. You have to make the alliances you need to get to the customer, the things that are important to the customer. So what's happening to us is the customer's requirements are attracting excellent competitors to play in the game, to maintain our lead, if you will, grow with our industry. IBM is not growing with our industry today. We just like to grow with it. Partnerships are required, necessary. They curtail expenses, and they help achieve a better delivery schedule. So look to partnerships as you already have, and keep doing that would be my thought for you. And finally, a thought on measurements and productivity, one of my own intimate experience. In recent and prior IBM life, I was the manufacturing manager at our Manassas, Virginia facility. We were bidding a follow-on contract to the Navy for additional signal processing computers. We built maybe 750 of them, and we were very, very proud that we had, over a period of years, reduced the selling price nearly in half. In then-year dollars, maybe we reduced the price about 70%. As our bid was getting ready to go out the door, the marketing team pointed out that it was slightly over their best guess for what a win price would be. Over and over that weekend, for a period of, it seemed like months, but it was actually 72 hours, we scrubbed every cost from every department in my organization. 1,200 guys and girls, how can we do this better and cheaper? And let me tell you, purchases alone were almost 40% of it, so we only controlled about 60% of the cost. Everyone could justify their piece of the pie, inside out and upside down. We couldn't get the price to move. And then finally, just took the pie chart and drew the pie chart with only 3 slices. Purchases, 40%. Hands-on manufacturing and test, 10%. The other 50%, I called it other. Then I asked all 1,200 people at one time, why is there any other in the pie chart? Because if this is the material and the manufacturing and people can put it together, there's 50% that's other. So if we tried doing it piecemeal, it didn't work. What happened in the next 8 hours was a revolution. Why didn't you ask us if we could build this thing differently than we have in the past? Let me tell you, the price is now down 50% again, but we do it completely different. We had to break our paradigm. Measurement systems need to help you do that. The right measurements and a map, a picture, enabled us not just to come down a learning curve and do it a little better. We reinvented, rethought, and redid the way we've done it for years. We basically had too many hands in the pie. We didn't need all those hands in the pie. We needed to release them to go do other competitive things for our company and creative things. We learned, and we continue to learn, that many of our tasks in our plant are still the same kind of way. We need to break down our paradigms. I'd like to close with a true story. In the 1960s, IBM was growing by leaps and bounds. The System 360 had been announced and it was taking the market by storm. The IBM company went from about 70,000 to 180,000 people within about 8 years. How do you get all those people assimilated and on board and think like the way you want and behave the way you want? Thomas Watson Jr., who was then the chairman of the company, used to like to tell an anecdote that I'd like to share with you. It comes from the Danish philosopher Kierkegaard, Søren Kierkegaard, from the late 1800s. Kierkegaard liked to tell the story, and Watson used to like to reflect on it, about the farmer on one of the fjords who enjoyed, much as many of us around here do, the migrating waterfowl, every spring and every fall. Watch the geese and the ducks come flying over. He says, look at their long journey. They have so far to get from their nesting grounds to their summer homes and wintering homes. He felt sorry for them. He had a beautiful pond on his farm. He put out some corn and grain. A few of them spied what was happening and came down, and they used to stop in the spring and in the fall on their way north and south and take advantage of some of the grain that the farmer left out for them. As time wore on, the farmer said, gee, I'm doing a wonderful thing for these ducks. I'll put out a little more corn and grain. And as the story unfolds, some of the ducks never left. It was just a wonderful, very comfortable place to spend summer, spring, winter, and fall. And Tom Watson used to say, ladies and gentlemen, to a new management class, don't ever forget that every business needs its wild ducks. And in our company, we try not to tame them. Well, just a few weeks ago, Business Week asked Thomas Watson Jr., what do you think the new CEO of IBM should do to revitalize the IBM company? And Tom Watson Jr. said, well, it's 82 today, and his smart is attacked. He said, the best thing for me to do, obviously, is to say, no comment, but I won't. He said, let me say this. He said, and he's referring to John Akers, the CEO of IBM, he's got to break the rules. He's got to get some ducks flying. Let me tell you, all of us tame wild ducks by our simple, everyday words and actions. We train ducks how not to fly. Gee, that's not our responsibility. Yes, but, oh, we tried that before. That wouldn't work. Hey, we don't have enough lead time to do that. Be practical. Please get down to earth with your ideas here. The operating procedures say, and maybe the final one that says, don't fight City Hall. I submit to you that improvement and change starts at the top, but are accomplished from the bottom. So perhaps I'd look, the best person who said it all was George Bernard Shaw. And he very simply put it this way. The reasonable man adapts himself to the world. The reasonable man adapts himself to the world. The unreasonable man persists in trying to adapt the world to himself. all you logic students, it obviously follows all progress depends upon the unreasonable man. Good afternoon. He wants to do something nice for me. I'd like to do something to him for all of you. The reason I said yes, you have to understand, Bob and I met each other once about 10 days ago. And it was one of those situations where you spent an hour and a half with somebody and you felt like you knew them all your life, that you were on the same wavelength about a lot of things that you were discussing. So when he asked me to come here today with you, I was not only flattered and honored to be part of your group, but I also did it because he asked. And it's kind of hard to explain. But I wanted to get back at him because the reason I couldn't say no is because standing on the stage with me, you all know this, we have one of the best examples of a wild duck. What we have here is the first annual Bob Templin Wild Duck Award poster. It talks about how to stuff a wild duck. This wild duck is stuffed with everything I talked about and more. And on the left over here is George Bernard Shaw's quote about the unreasonable man is the one on whom we depend for progress. And on the right-hand side is Tom Watson's quote from the 60s, that for Lord's sake, try not to tame too many of them. So, Bob, thank you very much.
We appreciate very much your being with us today. And I know it was an imposition for me to twist your arm. And he gave up a weekend to prepare and be here in Williamsburg to gather his thoughts together. Marty, you need to know that you're amongst good company here. We have all sorts of wildfowl at Thomas Nelson. We've got wild ducks and even a few wild turkeys. So your thoughts won't be lost on this group. However, so that you remember us not only by the words that you gave to us, but in return, we'd like to present to you a pen and ink drawing of the campus in hopes that you'll remember us and come to visit us at Thomas Nelson Community.
Thank you.
This concludes the formal portion of our convocation for today, and as I promised through the words of John Dever last Friday, is that our day ends as the convocation today ends, and so you're free to go about your life as you would at the end of a normal work day. That's to say that registration is not far off, and that will be brought back to earth very quickly with the many, many hundreds of students still seeking entrance to Thomas Nelson Community College. So have a good day, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Go far. Yeah,